Welcome to Spiritual Mentoring Group. Today is July 23rd, 2017. And it's been a tough week, and I have a feeling that things are going to be tough for a little while longer, at least for the next 9 days. So we'll see how things go. This week is Parshat Devarim. Devarim is the name of the book of Deuteronomy. It is also the name of the first chapter in the book, as we discussed several weeks ago. Each chapter is named for the first most important word in the chapter, and then each book, likewise, is named for that first parsha in each book. Okay, so each book is named for the first most important word in the book. And as we discussed several weeks ago, that's not the original name for the book. Originally, the names for each book had to do with the content of the book. But now, each book is named for the first significant word in the book. So, anyway, this week is Parshat Devarim, because we are starting the book of Devarim, book of Deuteronomy. And this is the last book of the Torah. So, it's our hint that we're actually getting very close to Rosh Hashanah. Right? And at this point in the book, we are 40 years and like 11 months, I think, into the Exodus from Egypt. So we know we're also getting close because of that. Okay? We've started reading the last book of the Torah, and that's our hint that we're actually starting to get close to the end of the year, or the beginning of the next year, Rosh Hashanah, okay? So tonight begins Rosh Chodesh, which in Israel now it's already Rosh Chodesh, which is the first of the month of Av, okay? Now, as I mentioned before, I'll mention again because Farah just joined us. At 11:30 our time, which is a little less than an hour now, we're going to actually stop, even if we're not finished with the class, because there has been a request for everybody to stop and say together the Shema and to say together Tehillim 120 or Psalms 120 in remembrance of the terrorist attack which happened on the the terrorist attack which happened in Israel on Shabbat, tensions on the Temple Mount, and given the fact that we are entering the 9 days, and this is just in general a very difficult time for the Jewish people, so we're going to stop, we're going to pause, and we're going to say Tehillim 120 together at the end of class today. Okay? Now, as I said in a previous class, traditionally, the month of Av, especially the first 10 days specifically, are not good for the Jewish people. These 10 days are filled with a history of terrible things happening to us. So for Ashkenazi Jews, from Rosh Chodesh Av till Tisha B'Av, we observe a time of partial mourning, right? We start during the 3 weeks, we start the 3 weeks with no public celebrations or listening to music with instruments. But as we get closer and as we get to Rosh Chodesh, things actually go up a level, if you will. We increase our observance of this partial mourning period. So the question is, what do we do during the 9 days, or not do during the 9 days? Okay, so first of all, if you don't own this set of books, okay, this set of books, Our Heritage, if you can, you need to own it, right? It's a set of 3 books. It's actually on my list of required reading for the conversion program, and that's because I believe that every Jewish home, regardless of your background or how long you've been Jewish, really should own these books. We've been religious now for 17 years, and we still go to this book several times a year. You would think that after so many years of observing the same holidays and the same seasons and everything, that we would know everything that there is to know, right? But there's so much to know. And when some things only happen once a year, it's easy to forget. So it's good to have a resource like this book that you can go back to from time to time. And it basically, you can see this one's, well, maybe you can't see, but this one says ER through Elul. Okay, so there's 3 books, and basically what it's done is it's divided the year into 3 sections, and then each book covers a certain part of the year, and it explains what's going on during this time of year, what special things are happening, what holidays are coming up, and then under each holiday, it explains the significance of the holiday. It explains what we do or do not do during that holiday. It's just a really, really great resource, okay? So I highly recommend that everybody have this set of books, Our Heritage, in their home if you can. I do not know if it's available by ebook. If it is, you could maybe look into downloading it that way. I'm not 100% sure. Okay, so first of all, we have just begun in Israel, and those of you who are in the United States will begin in a few hours. Rosh Chodesh Av, right? Rosh Chodesh is the first day of the new month, and it says in the Torah that on this day, on Rosh Chodesh Av, Aaron, the high priest, died. Okay, and it says in Bamidbar 33, verse 38, then Aaron the priest went up to Mount Hor at the command of Hashem and died there in the 40th year after the sons of Israel had come from the land of Egypt on the first day in the 5th month. Now it's interesting to note that even though the month of Av contains the saddest day of the year for the Jewish people, it says in Zechariah that this fast day is going to be, and actually most of the fast days are going to become, in the time of Mashiach, they're going to become times of rejoicing. So even though right now it's a time of mourning, even though right now Tisha B'Av is the saddest day of the year, in the future when Mashiach comes and sets everything straight, it's going to be a time of rejoicing and feasting. Okay, it says in Zechariah chapter 8, verse 19, thus says Hashem of hosts, the fast of the 4th, the fast of the 5th, the fast of the 7th, and the fast of the 10th months will become joy, gladness, and cheerful feasts for the house of Judah. So, love, truth, and peace. Okay, so when the month of Av begins, we not only do not engage in celebrations, but many people actually make a considerable effort to avoid doing anything that could lead them to rejoice. That's how serious this period of mourning during these 9 days is. So during this time, most people will not plant trees or undertake construction or home improvement projects, although it's permissible if, for example, like you have a hole in the roof and you need to patch it. Obviously, that's something that's really important and you need to do. But people shouldn't begin projects, that are just because they want to make their house nicer or whatever. If it's necessary in order to live in, then obviously it's. So during the 9 days, there are several things that we don't do that we did do during the first 2 of the 3 weeks, but now that we've entered the month of Av, until Tisha B'Av is over, we make we're more strict about what we don't do about our time of mourning. Okay, so during the 9 days, we don't purchase or make new clothes. Although some hold that if there's an exceptional sale, like that, missing out on, you would lose out on something, you can buy it. You just can't wear it during the 9 days. Okay, we don't put on new clothing during the 9 days because there's added enjoyment when we get new clothes and we put them on. So this is something that we don't do during the 9 days. And if you need to buy it, then you buy it, but you don't wear it until after Tisha B'Av. We also don't wash our clothing unless you don't have a lot of clothes, in which case you need to wash them. But most Americans and Westerners have more than enough clothes to last 9 days, so we don't wash laundry unless it's absolutely necessary. It is the height of summer. It's very hot. A lot of us get smelly and sweaty. And if you don't have a lot of clothes, then you might have to wash. But it's considered something that's done out of pleasure and, because it's more pleasant to wear clean clothes. And so we don't do it unless we absolutely have to. Children's clothes may certainly be washed because children's clothes get very dirty and they go through them very quickly. We also don't cut hair during this time. Now, it's not forbidden to become engaged during the 9 days, but any celebration of the engagement is postponed until after Tisha B'Av. We also don't go swimming during the 9 days. Jewish summer camps always have to get really creative as to what to do with the kids during this time. Although some hold that it is okay for children to swim, especially if they're under bar mitzvah age. But they say once they're old enough to understand the concept of the loss of the temple, they're not supposed to. And definitely not after bar mitzvah. Because, of course, in Judaism, once a child reaches bar mitzvah age, which is 12 for a girl and 13 for a boy, then they are responsible for the mitzvot as if they were an adult. Now, obviously, it's a difficult time because they are responsible as adults, but they don't have the forethought and the reasoning capabilities of an adult. So it can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. But okay, now for the big one. From Rosh Chodesh until after Tisha B'Av, we do not eat meat or drink wine except for Shabbat. All right, Ashkenazim follow these customs from Rosh Chodesh Av. Sephardim follow them only during the week of Tisha B'Av, which sometimes ends up being nearly a full week, but other times, like this year, only ends up being a few days. This year, I believe Tisha B'Av is on Monday night and Tuesday, not tomorrow, but 1 week from tomorrow. And so whereas Ashkenazim start observing these extra stringent prohibitions starting now, Sephardim, or most Sephardim, don't start until next Sunday, or let's say Shabbat, after Shabbat is over, okay? So other interesting stringencies. Kosher meat is not slaughtered during the 9 days. We also don't bathe. Now, that's not completely true. You're not supposed to take a bath just for enjoyment. You know how some people really enjoy taking a nice warm bubble bath or whatever. It's very relaxing for them. Not supposed to do that. You're only supposed to do what you need to do to be clean. And that's it. Okay? So, when I first read that, I was like, ew, gross. We're not allowed to bathe for 9 days. No, you're not allowed to bathe for pleasure. You are definitely allowed to bathe for health or hygiene. It is totally permissible. Now, there are some exceptions for Shabbat. We are permitted to bathe in preparation of Shabbat, and should. And on Shabbat, we are also allowed to eat meat and drink wine for Kiddush. Okay? On the evening, immediately before Tisha B'Av, after eating a good meal, shortly before the onset of sunset and the fast, we eat what is called a Suda HaMafseket, which means the final meal. And this meal is supposed to be very simple. It's really more symbolic than anything else. It's supposed to be limited to only one type of cooked food. So some people will serve hard-boiled eggs. Other people will make a dish out of lentils, both of which are supposed to represent being in mourning. Okay? So in addition to either eggs or lentils, we eat bread, dairy products, and or fruit. All right? Now, on Tisha B'Av, we not only endure a complete fast for 25 hours, but we don't wear leather shoes, we don't bathe, we don't put on perfume or creams. The biblical command is not to anoint ourselves with oil, but there's a modern equivalent of that. And we don't engage in intimate relations. Right? Now, the final one that may surprise you is that on Tisha B'Av itself, we also do not engage in studying the Torah. And that's because the idea is that studying the Torah is supposed to give us joy. So we are allowed to study some passages from the prophets, especially Jeremiah and Lamentations. Jeremiah is Yirmiyahu. Lamentations is called Eicha, which is what we read on Tisha B'Av twice. All right, you're allowed to study those, but you're not supposed to study the Torah because the study of Torah is supposed to be something that gives us joy. Now, the absence of the ability to study Torah is an opportunity to remind us that we've lost something very special, and that the fact that we still don't have a temple means that we have not managed to learn as a people. We haven't learned our lesson, and we're still guilty as a whole of the things that caused the temples to be destroyed in the first place. All right, it's also customary on Tisha B'Av to sit on a low stool or on the floor until about midday. So from Monday night sundown through Tuesday midday sometime, it's generally, most people will sit either on the floor or on a low stool. Many people do not sleep on their bed on Tisha B'Av. They will sleep on the floor, or if they can't because they have back problems or whatever, they'll sleep on their bed, but they won't sleep with pillows. All right? So they're just doing these extra things to make themselves just a little bit more uncomfortable, as a very physical reminder that we have lost something very special and that we are in mourning. Okay? An interesting custom is that some people after midday on Tisha B'Av will wash their floors in anticipation of the coming of Mashiach, right? So we have this tradition that says that the Mashiach will be born on Tisha B'Av, or will reveal himself on Tisha B'Av. And so on the afternoon of Tisha B'Av, some people will wash their floors as a way of declaring, we're ready, Hashem, you can send the Mashiach, we're expecting him any moment, and please send him now. Okay, so there's a whole lot that we don't do on Tisha B'Av, right? But the question is, what on earth do we do on that day? If there's so many things that you can't do, what can you do? Well, in the evening, after the first meal, we go to shul, the synagogue, and we hear the reading of Eicha, which is the Book of Lamentations. And it's not chanted in the normal chanting that is done for the Haftorah, for the prophets. Rather, it has its own very mournful tune. And we sit on the floor in shul or on a low stool, and we listen to the Book of Eicha being sung in this very sad, mournful kind of tune. And then we go home, right? Now, Tisha B'Av is a fast day, but it's not a Shabbat. There's no prohibition against driving or using electricity. So nowadays, many people will spend the day watching sad movies about Jewish history, either about the destruction of the temples or about the Holocaust, for example, very common. I'm imagining that before the times of the internet and the ability to just watch movies online, probably people sat and read books about these topics, about the loss of the Second Temple, either of the temples, history, or about the Holocaust and things like that. Okay, so in the morning, everybody goes to shul. We hear a second reading of Eicha, and it's kind of like, on Purim, we listen to the Megillah being read twice. So on Tisha B'Av, we listen to Eicha being read twice. And although we end the fast on sunset, most of the prohibitions actually continue until the middle of the next day, the 10th of Av. That's partly because the second temple actually continued burning into the 10th day. After the 9th of Av, many people refer to the rest of the month of Av, not as Av, but as Menachem Av. What does Menachem means? It means consolation or to comfort. All right, so obviously after such a sad and mournful period, we become hopeful that Hashem will soon fulfill his promise to the Jewish people and restore us to our rightful place among the nations in a right relationship with Hashem and with peace in the entire world. Okay? 6 days later, 6 days after the fast of Tisha B'Av, is the 15th of the month of Av, and it's called Tu B'Av, and that's because the number 15 is represented by the letters Tet and Vav, which make the sound Tu if you were going to read them, Tu. So it's called Tu B'Av, all right? And traditionally, Tu B'Av was an extremely joyous holiday when the temples stood. It was a holiday that marked the beginning of the grape harvest, and it was supposedly one of the happiest days on the Jewish calendar. After the destruction of the Second Temple, it was hardly ever celebrated. But in recent years, it has been revived as a sort of Israeli Valentine's Day. Okay? So just a little bit more about the month, and then we'll get on to the Parsha. But following the month of Av, we have the month of Elul. And Elul is considered a very special month, as it's the time that we're supposed to use to prepare ourselves for the coming of Rosh Hashanah. From Rosh Chodesh Elul until Yom Kippur is 40 days. And since 40 days is very significant in Judaism, it's the perfect amount of time to do a program to get you on track for the new year. There are a lot of books that are designed to take you day by day through the 40 days of Elul and then into Yom Kippur. All right? So our rabbis teach that the name, so that's about Tu B'Av, sorry, I forgot to switch. The name Elul is an acronym for the biblical phrase Ani L'Dodi V'Dodi Li, which means I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine. And that's from the Psalm of Songs, Shir HaShirim. All right, and what they are saying is that this time, which is leading up to Rosh Hashanah, which is the anniversary of creation and also the creation of the world and of mankind, but it's also the judgment day for the coming year. That it's during this time that the intense love between God and the Jewish people comes to the surface. So there's a parable that is told traditionally that before a king enters a city, its inhabitants will run out to greet him and receive him in the field. And it's at this time that anybody who desires has the ability to approach the king and to greet him. Very different from when he's seated on his throne in the court and you have to first petition to be able to get an appointment to enter the king's court, right? When the king is in the field, he is accessible to everyone. So when we read the verse in Yeshayahu 55, I guess I didn't do a slide for that. Oh well. When we read the verse in Yeshayahu, Isaiah chapter 55, verse 6, it says, "Seek Hashem while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near." We understand that to be referring to the month of Elul, when Hashem is nearer than any other time of the year. Now, nearer is, it's a subjective term. Does that mean God's nearer? God is everywhere, but he's more accessible. It's during this time of year that it's easier for us to reach out to Hashem, to feel his presence, for our prayers to be heard, okay? So, this week's Parsha is Devarim, right? And it essentially is Moses recounting the history of the 40 years since the Exodus from Egypt. Next week, he's going to summarize many of the commandments, but this week he is talking just basically of the history. We went here, we went there, we battled these guys, we did this. Clearly, he's preparing the people for a change in leadership, right? He's going to die, we know that. And he is going to be bringing Joshua to the people to explain, to show the people that God has chosen Joshua as his successor. And so he's starting this all off with this summary of their history, and then he's going to give a summary of the law, and we'll go from there. But, it's only basically a few chapters, sort of. I mean, it's the entire book of Devarim, but relatively speaking, it's only a few chapters until we're finished and Moshe dies. So, like I said last week, the Haftorah for this week is not the Haftorah for Devarim, because it does have its own Haftorah, but it's one of the three, it's the third of the three Haftorahs of calamity, speaking about the horrible things that would happen to the Jewish people before the Messiah comes and the Jewish people are vindicated and the world is finally redeemed. Next Monday, like I said, is Tisha B'Av. And then after that, we begin the 7 weeks of Haftorahs of consolation, which lead us up to Rosh Hashanah. Okay? So now we're going to go to the morning brachot. Last week, we looked at only one bracha, right? And that was Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam She'asa li kol tzarki, which means, blessed are you, Hashem our God, King of the universe, who has provided me with all my needs, right? So the next bracha that we're going to look at says, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Ozer Yisrael V'Givura, which means, blessed are you, Hashem our God, King of the universe, who girds Israel with strength. And when I first wrote that sentence, especially in the wake of the terror attack which happened over Shabbat here in Israel, my first thought was, is Israel really strong? But then I had to ask myself, what does it mean to be strong? If you were to ask me if I'm strong, right, I'd have to think about the answer because, I'm not physically strong at all. I have issues with my joints. I can't even open a jar of tomato sauce. I can't lift more than 50 pounds, which is like 23 kilo, and I can't run for more than about 5 seconds. So by all the normal measurements of what it means to be strong, I am certainly not. But then in other ways, I am. I survived abuse. I changed faiths when I found out what I believed was not based on the truth. I had to deal with people who hated me because I left the faith, because of the faith that I left, and those who hated me because of the faith that I left, because they didn't trust where I had come from. I dealt with all the challenges of that, being married to a non-Jew in a Jewish community. We changed continents twice, 3 times, depending on how you count it. I'm dealing now with chronic disease, and I've overcome a lot of emotional issues. And now I help others do the same. So if I were to ask, if somebody were to say, am I strong? Well, I might not be physically strong, but for sure, I'm a strong person, right? Am I strong? Sure. I'm a strong person in many ways, but I'm not physically strong. And yet, today, a neighbor challenged me on something I was doing in the garden, and I started to shake. At the confrontation, I gave in because I didn't know how to fight. And I came away thinking that I'm quite the opposite of strong. I feel like I'm weak. I don't want to fight. I think that Israel shares a similar picture. When we first came out of Egypt, we were slaves. We had been dehumanized for hundreds of years. Our dignity had been stripped from us, and we were inches from disappearing. That's not the image of strength, right? But when we left Egypt, the country was decimated. Of course, we didn't do it. God did it. But all of the other nations in the area were afraid of us because they saw what had happened to the Egyptians when we left. So were we strong, or did we just appear to be strong? When we sent the spies into the country to scout it out, 10 of the 12 came back with a negative report saying that the people that lived there were giants and that we could never overcome them and conquer the land. That's not strength, right? And we were punished by being forced to wander in the desert for 40 years. And while we were there, we were complaining. We complained about how we were going to die in the wilderness. We complained that there was nothing to eat. We complained that there was nothing to drink. Strong? Not so much. Then we had to fight many of these nations, and we won. Was it God or was it our own strength? Hard to say, right? We know it was God, but there was some of it was ours as well. We came into the promised land and we conquered it. Well, we conquered most of it, but then we stopped. We compromised. We shared the land. Eventually, we started to imitate the people in the land, and we ended up getting kicked out. I don't think that's the image of strength. And of course, we can talk about the Crusades, the Inquisition, the pogroms, and the Holocaust, right? Not exactly strong. Right. Not exactly strong. So what does it mean that Hashem girds Israel with strength? Every other nation that has faced a small percentage, just a small percentage of the challenges that we face, has basically disappeared from the face of the earth. Every empire comes and goes, and yet for 4,000 years, the Jewish people has persisted. We continue to exist and to live and to thrive, to face challenge after challenge and to bounce back again and again. We had a terror attack on Shabbat, and today the victims are being put in the ground. We get angry, we stop and we remember the fallen, and then we pick ourselves back up and we continue to live. We went to work today. We took care of our families today. We continued living. Is that strength? Well, in some ways it is. So what does it mean that Hashem girds Israel with strength? I think it means that he gives us our moral compass. He gives us a reason to keep going, even when the rest of the world tells us we should just curl up and disappear. And as I've said before, one of the reasons that the rabbis discourage potential converts is that it's not easy to be a Jew, right? We have small spurts of success on the world scene, but in general, the Jewish people is the world's scapegoat. Whatever's wrong with the world is usually blamed on the Jews. Yes, we're strong because of our tenacious hold on God. Yes, we're strong because we bounce back and we keep going, but that doesn't make it easy. So many Jewish people get tired of the constant fight and they give up. They distance themselves from their people. They disconnect from their true selves. But in the end, we, the Jewish people, continue because when our own strength fails us, we can cleave to Hashem, who is the true source of our strength. Now, I want to apologize to you all. I actually have 2 more brachas to cover, but I'm suddenly not feeling very well, so I'm going to cut the class short now. And I apologize. I apologize to those of you who are watching by video. You're going to have a very short video. I apologize to Farah, who's with me live. Farah, I don't know if you can see it, but I'm really not feeling well, and so I really have to say good night.